The atmosphere in the packed university auditorium was charged with anticipation. Karoline Leavitt, known for her bold leadership and unwavering faith, sat on stage as part of a high-profile debate on free speech and personal beliefs. The discussion had been lively, touching on politics, social issues, and the role of faith in public life. But then, the moderator, David Whitman, a well-known progressive commentator, leaned forward, his tone shifting from neutral to confrontational. "Take it off," he said, pointing directly at the simple gold cross hanging from Karoline's neck. The words cut through the room like a command. A murmur rippled through the audience, some stunned, others waiting to see how she would respond. David continued, his voice sharp. "If public figures are meant to represent everyone, shouldn't they keep their personal beliefs private? Shouldn't you remove that necklace and show you're truly impartial?" The silence that followed was thick with tension. Even those who typically agreed with David's views shifted uneasily in their seats. The moment was no longer about a piece of jewelry. It was about a challenge to personal conviction. Every eye was on Karoline, waiting to see if she would stand her ground or back down under pressure. The silence in the auditorium was suffocating. Every eye was locked on Karoline Leavitt, waiting, watching. The words "take it off" still hung in the air, sharp and heavy. David Whitman, the debate moderator, sat across from her, arms crossed, his expression expectant. He had issued the challenge, and now he was daring her to back down. Karoline remained still, her fingers brushing lightly against the small gold cross around her neck. She had worn it for as long as she could remember, not to provoke, not as a statement, but as a quiet reminder of the faith that had carried her through life's darkest moments. And now, she was being told to remove it, as if faith was something that could be discarded so easily. David leaned forward, emboldened by the silence. "A leader should be neutral," he pressed. "Symbols like that," he gestured toward the cross, "send a message. Shouldn't you represent everyone, not just those who share your beliefs?" Karoline exhaled slowly, lifting her head. A faint, knowing smile crossed her lips. She finally spoke, her voice was steady, unwavering. "You want me to take it off?" she asked, tilting her head slightly. "Why? Because it offends you? Because it makes you uncomfortable?" A murmur spread through the crowd. Even those who had initially agreed with David's perspective now seemed uncertain. His demand had shifted from a debate on neutrality to something more personal, an attempt to silence faith itself. Karoline let the tension linger for a moment before she continued. "This necklace isn't just jewelry, it's a reminder. A reminder of who I am, of the values I hold, of the strength I've found in times when nothing else could hold me up." She held the pendant gently between her fingers, her tone thoughtful but firm. "And I won't apologize for that." David's confidence faltered. He had expected resistance or anger, but instead she had met him with grace, with clarity, with quiet strength. She leaned slightly forward, her eyes locked on his. "You say faith should be private, but why? We don't ask people to hide their values, their convictions, their personal beliefs. So why should faith be any different?" A hush fell over the auditorium. Karoline continued, her voice unwavering. "I don't wear this cross to impose my beliefs on anyone. I wear it to remind myself to be better, to be kinder, to see the dignity in every person, even those who don't share my faith." She let the words hang in the air, watching as David shifted uncomfortably. The audience had stopped murmuring, now they were listening. Some nodded, others sat still, processing what had just happened. David opened his mouth, as if searching for a response, but no words came. His earlier confidence had faded. She had taken the moment he had designed to humiliate her and turned it into something else entirely, an invitation for reflection. Then, from somewhere in the crowd, a single clap rang out. Another followed, then another, and within seconds the entire auditorium erupted into applause. David exhaled sharply, shifting in his seat. This wasn't how this moment was supposed to go. He had expected her to crumble under pressure, to either react emotionally or shrink away. Instead, she had met the challenge with dignity, standing firm without tearing others down in the process. And for the first time that evening, David had nothing left to say. The auditorium erupted in applause, a stark contrast to the tense silence from moments before. Karoline Leavitt had done more than defend her faith. She had turned an attack into a moment of reflection. David Whitman, who had expected her to falter, now sat motionless. His attempt to pressure her into removing her necklace had failed. Instead, Karoline had stood firm, not with anger but with grace and conviction. She had made the audience see that faith wasn't something to be hidden or discarded for the sake of comfort. Dr. Evelyn Carter, an independent journalist on the panel, observed the exchange closely. Later, she would call it a defining moment in leadership, proving that true strength is not in shouting louder, but in standing firm without tearing others down. David exhaled, finally nodding, not in agreement but in recognition. He had tried to silence Karoline, but in the end she had won. Not through argument, but through unwavering truth. This moment was more than just a debate. It was a powerful reminder that conviction should never be compromised. What do you think? Should faith be hidden in public, or should we all have the right to express what we believe? Comment below. If you found this video interesting, drop a 1 in the comment section to let me know. Your support means a lot to me. Now relax and move on to the next story. In one of the country's most prestigious universities, students gathered for Professor Evelyn Carter's advanced game theory class. Known for her sharp intellect and outspoken views on social justice, Professor Carter had a reputation for challenging students not just academically but ideologically. As the class settled in, they noticed something unexpected. The projector displayed a bold statement: "Understanding Power Structures in Modern Academia." Baron Trump, sitting quietly in the back, observed as Carter began her lecture. "Mathematics," she declared, "is important. But numbers alone do not shape the real world. Privilege and power do." She paused, scanning the room before adding, "And some of you here benefit from that more than others." Though she didn't mention names, many students instinctively glanced at Baron. Unfazed, Baron calmly raised his hand. A brief silence followed before Professor Carter smirked and acknowledged him. "Yes, Mr. Trump?" she asked, amusement in her voice. Baron's response was measured. "If the goal of this class is to understand decision-making and problem-solving, wouldn't it be more valuable to focus on game theory rather than politics?" The room fell silent, sensing the confrontation that was about to unfold. The lecture hall was filled with an uneasy silence as Professor Evelyn Carter smirked at Baron Trump. "Since you believe math should take precedence over social issues, let's test that theory," she said, turning to the whiteboard. With quick, confident strokes, she wrote out an advanced game theory equation, one far beyond the class syllabus. Gasps rippled through the room. This wasn't just difficult, it was a deliberate challenge. A few students exchanged nervous looks. "That's graduate-level material," someone murmured. Baron, unfazed, rose from his seat and walked to the board. He studied the equation for a moment before picking up the marker. "This problem," he said, "can be broken down using von Neumann's minimax theorem, which allows us to find an optimal strategy with far less computation." His voice was steady, his movements precise. As he wrote, he explained every step, making even the most complex parts understandable. The class, once filled with skepticism, was now leaning in, fully engaged. Halfway through, Baron paused and glanced at Professor Carter. "We can proceed with the standard method," he said, "or I can demonstrate a more elegant approach based on Nash's 1950 theorem. Which would you prefer, Professor?" A flicker of uncertainty crossed Carter's face. She had expected hesitation, maybe even failure. But instead, Baron was teaching. Then, from the middle of the room, Ava Martinez, a quiet student, raised her hand. "Could we see both?" she asked hesitantly. Baron nodded. "Of course." He continued, presenting both approaches with exceptional clarity. Even students who had struggled with game theory before now found themselves understanding the material. Several pulled out their phones not to text, but to record his explanation. By the time he wrote the final step, the room burst into applause. Not hesitant or polite, but genuine and enthusiastic. Students who had entered the class indifferent to math were now completely captivated. Professor Carter, standing stiffly with her arms crossed, remained silent. What had begun as a power move had now become a defining moment in the classroom. But before she could respond, the door swung open. Dean Amanda Reynolds stepped inside. "Professor Carter, we need you for an urgent faculty meeting." Carter turned to the class. "We'll have to continue this discussion another time," she said quickly, gathering her things. But Barron wasn't done. "Professor," he said, his voice polite yet firm, "you issued a public challenge. Walking away now would send the wrong message about academic integrity." A murmur spread through the class. The challenge had been hers, and now she was avoiding it. Then Barron did something unexpected. He held out the marker. "Perhaps," he said with a knowing smile, "you'd like to walk us through your solution instead?" The room fell silent. Professor Carter hesitated, staring at the equation she had intended to be unsolvable for an undergraduate student. But Barron had already solved it. Twice. And now, everyone was waiting to see if she could do the same. The classroom was completely silent. Professor Carter stood motionless, staring at the marker Barron Trump held out to her. The very problem she had chosen to humiliate him had been solved. Twice. And now, all eyes were on her. For a long moment she seemed trapped. Then she let out a sharp breath, her fingers tightening around the edge of her desk. Finally, in a voice softer, "I made a mistake," the room tensed. No one had expected this. She turned to Barron, her gaze steady but less combative. "I've spent years fighting against what I saw as privilege, assuming that those with advantages couldn't possibly understand struggle. But today you proved me wrong. You didn't just solve an equation, you demonstrated what true education should be." I lost sight of that. Murmurs spread through the class, but this time they weren't whispers of tension, they were murmurs of realization. From the doorway, Dean Reynolds stepped forward, clearly intrigued by what had unfolded. "Perhaps this class can serve as a model," she said, glancing at Carter. "A space where academic rigor comes first and personal biases don't overshadow the pursuit of knowledge." In the weeks that followed, the class transformed. Attendance skyrocketed, not because of controversy, but because students were eager to learn in an environment where merit, not politics, determined success. Barron continued helping classmates, and even Professor Carter shifted her teaching approach, refocusing on what truly mattered, knowledge and growth. This isn't just a story about math. It's about integrity, leadership, and the courage to stand for what's right. Barron could have humiliated Carter, but instead he showed grace, humility, and the true spirit of learning. What do you think? Should education stay focused on academics, or should social issues have a place in the classroom? Let us know in the comments. If you found this video interesting, drop a 1 in the comment section to let me know. Your support means a lot to me. Now relax and move on to the next story. Imagine this. You're 20 years old, no degree, no fancy training, just a garage. A dream and a challenge from none other than Elon Musk. In a world where opportunity seems out of reach, one young woman proves that passion and persistence can break barriers. Watch as Sophie, a self-taught inventor, takes on an impossible challenge, fights against the odds, and stands face to face with Elon Musk himself. Will she succeed? Stay tuned to find out. The atmosphere inside the Tesla event hall crackled with excitement, a palpable buzz of anticipation sweeping through the crowd. Engineers, investors, and die-hard fans filled every seat, their eyes glued to the stage as Elon Musk, the visionary himself, unveiled the latest breakthroughs in AI and automation. Each revelation sent ripples of applause through the audience. This wasn't just a presentation, it was a glimpse into the future. Then Elon paused, scanning the room. "Let's take some questions." A forest of hands shot up instantly, eager voices calling for attention. But amidst the sea of eager professionals and tech aficionados, one stood out. Near the back of the hall, a young woman, barely in her 20s, rose to her feet. Unlike the polished executives in crisp suits or the die-hard tech enthusiasts wearing Tesla-branded gear, she stood there in simple, unassuming clothes. Clutching a well-worn notebook close to her chest, she cleared her throat, her voice unwavering despite the weight of the moment. "Mr. Musk," she called, loud enough to cut through the murmurs. "My name is Sophie. I'm 20 years old, and I built a robot in my garage using nothing but scrap parts. I don't have a degree, no formal training, but I believe in what I can do. And I want to work at Tesla. Will you give me a job?" For a moment the room fell into a stunned silence. Then murmurs. A few chuckles rippled through the crowd, subtle but unmistakable. A nobody from nowhere standing up in front of one of the most brilliant minds in the world, asking for a job. Bold. Maybe even foolish. But Elon Musk didn't laugh. He tilted his head, intrigued, his expression unreadable. "A robot, huh?" His gaze sharpened as he leaned forward slightly. "What does it do?" Sophie swallowed hard, her fingers tightening around her notebook as if drawing strength from it. "Right now, it can pick up objects and perform basic tasks. But I know I can make it better. If I have the right resources." The room was watching now, waiting for the inevitable polite brush-off, the quick nod before Elon moved on to the next eager questioner. After all, this was a high-stakes event, attended by some of the brightest minds in the industry. Surely this girl with no credentials wouldn't be taken seriously. But Elon Musk wasn't most people. He studied her for a moment, the gears in his mind turning. Then a slow smirk tugged at the corner of his lips. "All right," he said, his voice laced with challenge. "Here's the deal. Improve it. Make it solve a real-world problem. Show me something impressive, something that actually matters. Then I'll consider giving you a job." A collective gasp swept through the room. Was he serious? Sophie's heart pounded, but her resolve was unshaken. Her lips curled into a determined smile. "Challenge accepted, Mr. Musk." And just like that, the game had changed. The world may not have known her name yet, but that night Sophie walked away with more than just a question answered. She left with a mission, a purpose, a shot at something most people only dared to dream of. Little did they know, this was only the beginning. Have you ever had to prove yourself against the odds? Just like Sophie, do you believe that passion and determination can be more powerful than formal education? Share your thoughts below. We'd love to hear your story. Back in Austin, Texas, she stood in the middle of her small garage, staring at her robot. It sat there, a rough collection of salvaged parts and wires, looking nothing like the polished tech Tesla engineers worked with. But she didn't care. This machine was hers, built from nothing but determination and scraps. But now it had to be more, much more. She grabbed her notebook, flipping through pages of sketches and calculations. "All right, Elon Musk," she muttered under her breath. "You want something impressive? I'll give you something unforgettable." Sophie knew she couldn't just upgrade her robot. It had to solve a real-world problem. After weeks of brainstorming, she found her mission: waste management. Her community struggled with trash piling up in the streets, people confused about what could be recycled and what couldn't. If her robot could fix that, She wouldn't just impress Elon Musk, she'd make a difference where it mattered. She scoured junkyards, picking through piles of scrap metal, old circuit boards, and discarded sensors. "One person's trash is my robot's next upgrade," she joked to herself as she loaded her backpack with parts. She spent her nights glued to a second-hand laptop, watching tutorials on AI, robotics, and machine learning. But ambition was one thing, execution was another. Sophie had no high-tech lab, no expensive tools, just a cluttered garage filled with broken appliances, discarded motors, and rusty wires. So she did what she had always done. She hustled.